everybody. This is Francesco Abbruzzino, and I am on the phone today with Doug Hess. And he is, I think you're one of two authors on Gordon Gekko's CEO Lessons from Wall Street for a Winning Attitude. And I say one of two, Doug, because I thought I clicked on here and saw that David, is that it? Yeah, David Bowman. You guys co-write this book together?
Yes, he's the co-author of the book, and we had a great time co-writing the book together.
Oh, all right. Why don't you tell me a little bit about it? I got to tell you, Gordon Gekko, when I was a little kid, I used to want to be Gordon Gekko. It didn't turn out that way, but I wanted to be Gordon Gekko.
Right, and Gordon Gekko is probably a lot of your listeners are familiar with. He was the fictional character from the movie Wall Street, played by Michael Douglas, where he plays a corporate raider that would win it pretty much at any cost, do anything that he needed to do in order to get ahead and get the sell, get the kill, if you will, in terms of that. And so I've always been a big fan of the movie Wall Street, thought it was a great movie. But a lot of people look at that movie with a lot of negative side effects, win at all cost, and do anything it takes, steal, cheat, borrow, whatever, to be able to get the end result. And I really loved the movie so much, but I thought, you know what, we could really put a positive spin on this and use a lot of the quotes and take it from a negative concept and flip it over to a more positive message. And that's what Dave and I tried to do, and we hope that we did a good job of doing that, taking something that was negative, turning it into a more positive message, saying you don't have to win at all cost and still be able to be successful.
Okay, and that's great. So basically going through your chapters, if somebody takes this, you're basically going to teach them methods or approaches to handling stuff and stay motivated even though you're kicked and knocked down, but keep going. But it's not a win at all cost type attitude. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think society has that mentality right now that you have to win at all cost in order to get ahead. And Dave and I both would argue that that's not necessarily true. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that there's not going to be sacrifices that's going to have to be made, and there's going to be some late nights in order to achieve that, but you can do that with having just that right attitude, looking at things in a positive light, and not taking that, well, if I'm not cheating or stealing or whatever, I can't get ahead. And we would say that that's not true.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, I was watching a documentary last night. It was on Rockefeller JP Morgan, and I forget all the other two characters, Ford and I forget the other individual, but they basically went through these guys and how they had that attitude of win at all cost, and and it seemed like the whole premise was that's how you're going to get ahead in life. But I like you, I don't agree with that. I like the concept of just staying motivated, doing the right things, and as long as you have that energy and motivation, you're going to succeed.
Right, and I assume you were referring to the History Channel's The Men Who Built America.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah,
Carney. Carney, is this Carney or something like that?
Yeah. Carnegie and Rockefeller and JP Morgan and stuff. And they really set the tone early on, like you said, if you watch that documentary, and I thought it was pretty well done, and gives a pretty good example of what early entrepreneur businesships were. And if you listen to that and study that time period, a lot of the things that they were doing at that point wasn't considered illegal.
Right.
But it's since then, with Teddy Roosevelt and some others, that really put business in their place and told them that we're going to have guidelines, we're going to have regulations, and if you step over that line, you're going to get penalized for it.
So how's somebody going to get ahead then if they're not doing some of this? Because I think the perception out there is the only people that are getting ahead are the ones that are with the attitude of greed is good. And So how's your book going to help someone to view life differently and try to get through these hurdles and move on and succeed in life?
Sure, and I think that's a great question. And the chapter's broken down into 8 different sections, if you will, 8 different chapters.
Okay.
And what we've done is we took a piece of the movie and kind of wrote on each section. And it's funny that you said, greed is good. How can you write a book on Gordon Gekko and not have a chapter talking about greed is good? And that's actually our last chapter in the book, talking about greed is good. But really, to get back to your basic question, how can you get ahead and not cheat, steal, lie, etc.? I think was really your basic question.
Right.
And what we've done is broken it down, like I said, into 8 different chapters. And chapter number 1 is really dealing with every dream has a price. And that's talking about sacrifices, making sure that you really want XYZ goal. Because I would argue that there's a lot of people that have dreams and goals, and that's probably as far as they get.
Right.
You might even get as far as writing it down on a piece of paper, and it's quickly gone. However, in order to to have those dreams and those goals be successful for you, you're going to have to make sacrifices. Sacrifices is not necessarily a bad thing. Making sure that you know what you want and then be willing to pay that price, if you will, in order to achieve that goal. For example, one of the examples we talk about in our book is, let's just take for example, maybe a single mother trying to better herself. But in order for her to do that, maybe she's going to go to college and get an education. Well, if she does that, she's probably going to have to miss Johnny or Susie's baseball game or swimming meets and stuff. Or if she's there, she's going to be studying at the house and maybe not going to have any time short term to be able to give to her child. And that's a sacrifice that has to be made, short term versus long term goals, and whether or not that's going to be helpful. Chapter 2. Well,
let me ask you real quick, Doug. Does that chapter help a person to realize or to better understand that they need these to act on those dreams? Because a lot of people will sit there and they don't realize I'm self-employed, and it's a lot of hard work. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of focus, a lot of tireless days at work. And people don't realize that, and they just say, I got this dream. But how do you get them to overcome having the dream and actually taking that step forward into achieving their dream?
Yeah, we talk about that in Chapter 1 is, basically we're talking about what sacrifice is all about. And I think what you're getting to really deals and dives in with Chapter 2, okay. And that's talking about money never sleeps. Now, that can be looked at as a negative concept, but what we're saying is you've got to put in your hard work, and I think you would appreciate that and agree with that, being an entrepreneur yourself in your situation, and not sitting back on your laurels. Mm-hmm. I think, like you were saying, so many times people have dreams, has goals, but they don't have what it takes to get them to the next level. Sometimes it's because they're maybe pure lazy or they don't have that drive. Other reasons, it's because they don't know what that next step is.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, it's not a one-size-fits-all. Every situation is going to be a little different and a little bit unique. But Chapter 2, talking about money never sleeps, that's really talking about, like I said, making sure that you're putting in the hard work, but at the same time, making sure that you're not sitting on your laurels. Because I think so many times we have a tendency to do that because, like I said, we have an idea, and sometimes it's because we're afraid to move to the next hurdle, mm-hmm. because we don't know what's out there. Fear, unknown, whatever that might be. And so really Chapter 2 is dealing with that.
Okay. And then we move on. What else will they learn from it? What's Chapter 3 all about?
Yeah, seeking information. So many times when it comes to, excuse me, talking about chapter number 3 is the most valuable commodity is information. And there's a quote in the movie that Michael Douglas or Gordon Gekko says that really talks about that. And he says, and I'm paraphrasing here off the top of my head, but basically he says the most valuable information, or the most valuable commodity I know is of information. It's not gold or some other precious metal.
Right.
And I think by going out there, doing your homework, doing your research in order to be able to know what that next step is. I know we talked sometimes, in chapter 2 where we said people have a dream and they don't understand what that next step is. Well, that's going out, getting the information, doing the research, doing the legwork in order to find out what is your next step.
Well,
next steps.
Does this chapter sort of hold their hand and walk them through maybe a basic approach to it? Because I know, like, everybody asks me on all my media things I have, how the heck do you get all this information? Where are you getting it all from? And to me, it seems easy. It's right there. You know how to research it. But for some reason, that seems to be a huge hurdle for just the common folk that it's a barrier to them, and I don't know why.
Yeah, and I would agree with that, because I think probably you and I take a lot of things for granted, and or we're willing to just dive in and start with something as simple as a Google search. I mean, I'm trying to, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but if nothing else fails, that's something that's just probably more of an instinct to me and you, that we're going to jump in and do it, where others go, oh, I never thought of that.
So true.
Because sometimes the simplest things are right in front of us, and we're trying to make it so much harder than it really is. And we talk about in the chapter 3 about information. We talk about in sales. We take a sales approach and saying sometimes you go to a conference or you go to meetings, and some of the most important information that you receive isn't necessarily in those meetings, but it's out in the hallways, pressing the flesh, talking to people, networking, making sure that you ask questions, because I think that's the other thing, that people are afraid to ask questions because they're afraid they're going to look stupid or dumb in terms of that. And what's the old saying? There's no such thing as a dumb question, because you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And I think that in itself is in a hurdle, because, again, we live in a society that I would argue that people almost expect us to know everything. And if we don't, then society looks at us as going, oh, maybe we shouldn't call on Doug. Maybe we shouldn't talk to him because he's not as top-notch as we originally thought he was.
Right.
In terms of that. So I think a lot of it has to do with society, and people just don't want to look or feel embarrassed in the process.
Okay. And you see that a lot, I think, in corporate America. I don't know if you see it as much in small business, but in small business, I can say for myself, you tend to, and it's a negative for me, you tend to not really pay attention to what others are saying on your team sometimes, and you seem to think you know everything.
Right. Yeah, and I think we'd all acknowledge that nobody knows everything in that situation, but I think society puts a lot of pressure on us to think that we need to know everything.
Yeah.
In terms of that. And then we jump into chapter 4 that's talking about, it's titled, Poor, Smart, and Hungry. Poor, Smart, and Hungry. And basically what that chapter is talking about is 9 times out of 10, small business owners or people that break out on their own to be successful aren't the richest guys in the room. Usually they start off being poor because they have a dream, they have a vision, they have something that's going to get them to the next level, or they think that it's going to get them to the next level. And they're not afraid to take chances. Smart, you need to be a little savvy, you need to have that education. Even though you might not have an education, we're not saying that you can't be successful without one, but you've got to be smart enough, whether it's book wisdom or street wisdom, to be able to know how to negotiate. And you might not have a college diploma, but you still need to know how to go out there and network,
right,
make connections, go out there and talk to people, and then finally be hungry. I think that's pretty self-explanatory in the sense of being hungry means making sure that carrot's out in front of you and you're attacking it, that you want it. Because I think so many times, and I've talked to some people when Dave and I are out on the road traveling and talking, where people, they seem hungry, that they want it, but they don't want to have to put in the work and the effort.
Oh, yeah, you see that a lot. You see that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think, you got to be very careful there, and you got to make sure that you're really hungry, because I think so many times people go, oh, I want to do this, and this, and then they start seeing the work that's required and things that's going to be late at night and behind the scenes, and people going to go, all right, I'm full, I'm done.
Yeah.
And so you have to be hungry in terms of that, and know that you're going to have to put in a lot of late hours, and a lot of work. Okay. And I think that's really where the rubber meets the road in a lot of aspects.
Right. And I would agree. I think that whole hunger thing, if I, in my situation, I was laid off and I was at a high-level executive, so I was very hungry. I had to make my job, the new business I was going into, work. And
right.
that's what pushed me, because I had 2 little girls, a wife, and I'm like, this has to work.
Yeah, and sometimes we could say it's hungry, or maybe it's sometimes a little motivation mixed in there with that hunger. In your example, where you had that motivation that you needed to be successful in order to provide for your family, right. For example. And then we talk about Chapter 5, bagging the elephant. I don't know if you remember yeah. in the movie Wall Street, where he gets a call from Gordon Gekko, and he says, all right, we're going to buy X amount of shares. And he goes, whoo, I just bagged the elephant. And that's making sure that we talk about being professionally persistent. And because we know every time you go into a sales, and we just kind of took this from a sales standpoint from this particular chapter, but I think it can work in other aspects as well. We wrote it from a sales aspect that, not every time you go in to sell something to somebody, they're going to say, yeah, I want that. You're going to have to be what we refer to as being professionally persistent, going in there, providing some type of knowledge every time you come to the table, but not being in their face so often that it almost becomes a nuisance or annoying.
Yep.
And so talking about trying to find that right balance, that right mix, where you're asking for their business, and even though they might be pushing back to you, you're providing them with some type of knowledge or information that's going to be helpful for the organization or the business that you're trying to talk to, so they see value in you, to where they're, so basically it's a slow selling process, but being professionally persistent in the process.
Okay. And is that the last chapter, or do we have one more? The last one's Chapter 8, right?
Yeah, and so we got Chapter 6 is talking about controlling your emotions. So many times in business or in anything that you do, sometimes your emotions get the best of you.
Right.
Where it's a great emotion or it can be a negative emotion. No matter what, sometimes your emotion just can really get the best of you. And basically, we're talking about how to control those emotions, how not to let your emotions get the best of you in a great situation or in a bad situation. Because sometimes somebody could say, yes, I want product A, B, or C, and then you get too emotional and you try to sell them everything.
Oh, yeah.
And then in the process, you lose them.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just really talked to them about controlling your emotions, both on a positive and a negative aspect.
Right.
And then Chapter 7, we talk about perks. Lots and lots of perks. And that's with being successful. Success breeds perks, we would argue. No matter if you're working for an organization, if you're doing well, what's going to happen? 9 times out of 10, maybe you're going to get box seats to the local baseball game or football game because somebody sees value in you, that you're being successful, and they want to reward you. Sometimes companies can't do that financially, so they look at other things in order to be able to provide you with something. And we're arguing that's part of the motivational process, is that you should be rewarded, because everybody likes to be rewarded, spoke highly of in that process. And the more successful you are, more perks you're going to be able to be brought to the table for you. And then Chapter 8 talks about greed is good. And like I said, how can you write a book on Gordon Gekko and not talk about how greed is good?
Right.
Now, a lot of people say, well, Doug, greed is bad. We're taught that greed is bad. And that's true. There's what we would argue a good greed and a bad greed. And what I mean by a good greed is this. When you're successful as an individual, and we talked about the example in the book, you could be a multimillionaire or a multi-billionaire. What do you usually have? Perhaps multiple homes, multiple cars, maybe a plane, a yacht, etc. And so we're arguing by you being successful, you are actually benefiting others in that process.
And it makes sense. You are, basically.
Yeah, because you're going to, let's just say hypothetically you own 4 homes. Well, you're probably not going to be living in all 4 homes on any single day, so you're going to need people to manage that. You're going to need people to take care of your estate, keep the lights on, the house looking nice, the gardens looking great, etc. Mm-hmm. You're going to need somebody to fly your plane, have your yacht, etc. And so what we're saying is the more successful somebody can be, they should be able to then look back and help others be successful as well. And I think today, society, we look at success as almost a negative word.
Unfortunately, I think that's the case.
Yeah, and we say, well, you're successful, that's bad. You must be doing something wrong or illegal. And that's not necessarily the case. Now, are there some bad apples out there? Sure. It's not a perfect world, and I'm not here to say that it is. But I also would argue that being successful is not a bad thing.
And I would agree with you. All right, we're running out of time. Let me ask you this. It sounds like an interesting book, and especially I was in sales. I did national sales with GTE, and a lot of the different chapters you're covering are very helpful for someone in sales and someone in life that wants to go through life and succeed. Where can somebody go to purchase this book? On the screen, I have your Facebook page. Is that the best place to go? And tell us a little bit if they want an ebook, paper book, and how they can get this material.
Sure. Like you mentioned, we have a Facebook page just simply called Gordon Gekko CEO Lessons from Wall Street for a Winning Attitude. And both Dave and I check that and monitor that and post ourselves because we're very interested in hearing back from individuals. There's a link on our Facebook page that takes you out to Amazon where you can buy the book at Amazon.com. But also Barnes & Nobles and Books A Millions and other different distributors also our bookstores are also carrying it as well.
Okay, great. And it sells for $18. Is that a soft copy or a hard copy?
That's a hard copy.
Hard copy, okay. Well, great. Mm-hmm. And you guys got a great rating there from Amazon. Any parting words? It was great talking to you. I think your book will be great for any individual that wants to just get their focus and get that winning attitude. What closing remarks would you like to put out there?
Well, really the last thing I would just want to say and maybe end with a quick story, I want to talk about believing in yourself and knowing thyself. And I don't know if your listeners know a gentleman by the name of Theodore Gazo, but he was told by his high school art teacher that he couldn't draw, and 28 different publishers told him that he couldn't write. But he really believed in who he was, never took that as a setback. And so the 29th publisher took a chance on him, and in 1937 he published his first book called And I Think I Saw It on Mulberry Street. Today, you know Theodore Gazo as simply Dr. Seuss. So just believing in yourself and knowing that you can do it is more than half the battle. That's
a great way to end it, Doug. Thanks a lot for coming on the show, and hopefully we'll get some books out there, and that's it. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you.